Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo. We're here today doing one of them good old-fashioned live commentaries with Titanfall 2. And today we're going to be playing Bounty Hunt, because I found Bounty Hunt was the mode that's most relevant to the discussion I wanted to have today, one that is very much related to the human element when it comes to multiplayer game design. I think all too often, as gamers, as consumers, we think it's a very simple thing, right, to build a game, or to build a game type, specifically a mode or an environment in a player versus player game where players constantly do exactly what they're supposed to do. The biggest thing that comes to mind, of course, is the whole PTFO campaign for Battlefield. Now, of course, in objective-based games, much like Bounty Hunt, we do obviously want to see people playing the objective. You know, it's important that people farm the necessary points, or at least do the things they need to do to help the team go towards a win. But at the end of the day, a developer can only do so much in terms of game design to persuade or to encourage players to play the objective. The reality is you have thousands upon hundreds of thousands of players potentially, all with their own personal agenda. The average individual boots up a game and isn't really concerned with how much fun the people on the other team have, how much fun people on their team have. No, the only thing they're concerned about is how much fun they have. I mean, that's the simple, most basic way to look at it. Humans play games because they want to have a good time. So, no, the average player isn't going to go out of the way to make sure that their team wins just because they know that that will make person B happy. They just want to have a good time. And for some players, that means often not focusing on the primary objectives. That means doing things outside of the primary objective that brings them personal enjoyment. In some games, the issue is larger than others. I would say that in an instance with a game like Bounty Hunt, a mode like Bounty Hunt in Titanfall 2, it's more of a second nature thing. Like, people aren't intentionally avoiding completing the objective. They just get caught up in killing. Depending on their personal skill level, they might find it difficult to focus on killing and also making their way to the banks, or they just struggle to actually cash in at the banks because of heavy, enemy defenses. There are a lot of factors that come into play, and again, certain games and certain game types within games offer varying environments where we might see issues, success and failure when it comes to players playing the objective. And I totally should have killed all those guys, but I managed to miss every single one of them. Unfortunately, my flatline, as I've decided to pick today just because I wanted to do something different, is not nearly as good as my alternator or my R2 would have been, but I wanted to switch things up. So, it's really something you have to think about. A lot of people really do think that a developer can just add all these things and instantly people are going to play the objective. I won't deny that portion of game development, has to revolve around building intelligent things, smart things that do their best to persuade players to play the objective. But there's always going to be a limit. There's always going to be a barrier where it simply isn't enough. You can't 100% influence what a player is going to do. And again, humans, we're selfish at the end of the day. And when it comes to playing video games, man, people want to have fun. The average player wants to have a good time. And if that happens to be at the cost of your patience because you just want to get kills and you want to win, you want your team to always be first place, well, then that's just the way the cookie is going to crumble, my friends. It's the way it's going to be. It's a reason that people get furious. It's, again, the biggest campaign, man, is everything with Battlefield. And I think DICE has actually done a lot with Battlefield 1 to reward players for playing the objective. They've done, I think, as much as they can within the constraints of what Battlefield is all about. I think they've done a really good job, and I think people forget about that human element. There's a massive amount of psychology that goes behind encouraging players to play the objective or to do something that you want them to do in a game. And you watch any interview with any game developer on any project that they're working on or that was being worked on, and one of the biggest things you hear them talk about, especially in open world sandbox environments and multiplayer games, is that the players always do the things that they never expected them to do. And that often creates a lot of special and magical things in games. In multiplayer games especially, you get certain tactics or things that the developer just never intended for. For example, bunny hopping back in the days of Titanfall 1. Not an intended mechanic by any mean, but it was a side effect of player creativity. Players doing what they wanted to do and, again, playing the way they wanted to play. So I think that freedom that that choice that players bring to a game is definitely an important thing. But again, you have to see the downside of it, see the negatives. He could have totally landed that punch. Did he do it? No, he didn't. He's gonna smoke me because he's got that XO. I'm gonna do my best to run out of there and not get XO'd. We'll take out this Scorchy. So we got a pretty good lead here. Bounty Hunt, at the end of the day, I always have loved this mode deeply, and I think I've talked about it on stream about 1,000 times over, because the number one argument that people always make against Bounty Hunt isn't ever, you know, the realization that there's just a huge human factor in the game and you can never control that human factor flawlessly. But people often talk about how the points can be camped, and that's just kind of the point of it, though. The good thing is most of the maps in Titanfall 2, when it comes to where the banks actually are, you know, are easy to push in. You have a lot of tools. You have electric grenades and fire stars. You have a lot of things that give you the ability to clear those rooms out before you go ahead and make a push. So I've never personally had an issue with the design of it. There are things I've talked about previously in Bounty Hunt that I would like to see changed. The way certain objectives are marked, I think, would better help encourage players, especially the more average player who doesn't put in, you know, hundreds of hours, especially around launch time when there's a lot of new players on board. You know, give them a more clear-cut idea of how many points certain things are worth and the benefit that they can have to their team simply by killing a group of grunts and making sure that that cash gets turned in. I would have also liked to have seen the banks rotate. I think rotating banks would have just kept people on their toes, but at the end of the day, you can also see the negative side of that and how that would have been increasingly difficult for, you know, a less than average player to stay on track and to realize where they need to go next. Something that the game already struggles with, people actually making to the banks and cashing in on time and so on and so forth. So there's just a lot to consider, and you know, that's really what I just wanted to remind you here. I don't have the answers, you know, I don't think developers have all the answers. It's just one of those things in game design that is always going to be very difficult to build for, to create for. You know, it will probably never have a clear answer for it. It is actually, I think, an interesting thing to bring up, though, to wonder why there isn't more psychological research into these sorts of things. You know, that's definitely a place where publishers could be spending their money to ask themselves, you know, well, let's focus a little bit more on that psychological factor when it comes to the players and you know, the human element, and see if we can't find ways to assist our developers in making a better product, or a product that, you know, gives them more control over how the players play the game when they want them to. You know, some games obviously really encourage freedom, and sometimes you don't want to remove that freedom factor, but there's no doubt that you want to build certain constraints. You know, again, in a game like Battlefield, in a mode like Bounty Hunt, you know, you want to do as much as you can to encourage the player to play the objective and to make sure that everyone has at least a clear and defined idea as to what they need to be doing if they want to help their team win. After that, still, it's just 100% player choice, right? If that guy decides he just wants to go get as many kills as he can with his North Star and never bother defending the banks, even though his team is losing massively, well, then that's just the way it's going to be, you know? There always will have to be that point of acceptance. It's something that gamers, the vocal minority, let's put it that way, vocal minority people who play games aren't very good at realizing or taking the time to realize the boundaries and the limitations behind the things that they play. You know, they expect developers to be magic sometimes. That's how I feel recently with a lot of the outspokenness this year as a whole. You know, again, I know it's not often everybody. It's often that vocal minority, but I'm all for, you know, games being built for the consumer and consumer-friendly practices, but I think it's equally as important as consumers and as gamers, if we want this industry to grow and to continue to prosper and to be healthy, and to see developers make, you know, huge progress in areas of game design, like, you know, the psychological aspects of influencing players to play the objective. We need to be more understanding. You know, can you imagine a world where game developers could speak wholeheartedly and transparently about the difficulties of game development without having to worry about an outcrying of just immature fools who claim that they're just out to take their money, and, you know, they're lazy, and every other derogatory term you could ever come up with to someone who dedicates, you know, potentially 70-80 hours a week during crunch and, you know, maybe even during regular hours to trying to make games, you know, because they love games too. You know, that's always irked me. You know, there's a point that we've reached where I think there is a larger and larger majority of people just not paying respect to the human side of what goes into making a video game. Like the fact that, yeah, that's not a computer that made that game. That's a human. They have a job, they have feelings, they have emotions, and they're the ones who have dedicated the time to building this product so they can enjoy it and so you can enjoy it. And if you're just going to sit there and just endlessly tear them down, and you know, it's not just the consumers, it's other creators, man, just really out of touch when they talk about game development sometimes. And I'm not saying you have to have all the answers and understand how game development works flawlessly, but there needs to be a greater element of respect paid to the developer. You know, I really especially hate hearing words like lazy thrown around towards developers. Like, there's boundaries, man, you know? And yeah, you could hop on Steam and find a legitimate cash grab, you know, just something that has been made out of pure villainy and awfulness, but I think that is a rarity. I think that is in the smallest percent of the games that are on the market. And to say that the sort of thing about a game developer because you don't agree with the decision or you're not pleased with that decision repulses me. It's frankly a disgusting practice. And how can you ever expect things to get better if we don't come to a point in time where developers and, you know, players, the consumer, can interact on equal footing with, you know, with as much transparency as possible? Open conversation and an understanding of anything in life is what solves problems. It's what paves the way forward, you know? I mean, can you imagine if we could actually come to a point where everyone playing a game, or at least the vast majority of people playing the game, have that better understanding so they can provide realistic feedback to developers? You know, imagine a development team having 100,000 Q&A people on their team because people actually take time to report real critical feedback and not just go out on the web and use forums and social media as a place to put developers on blast because they're not happy with the decision they made. Some food for thought this week, guys. And the next time you're out, if you happen to be one of those people ready to go to a forum somewhere and tear a developer apart and call them lazy, no good nothings, and they just want my money and yada, 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 really think about the person, the people behind that screen, the people behind that product, the time and effort they've put in, and the realization that 99.9999% of the time, they're just someone like you who loves games and who wants to make something that's going to put a smile on people's face. It's not easy. And I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. Looks like we're going to finish this match, guys. So let's go ahead and wrap things up here with the flatline. Not a bad match. You know, we did all right. I didn't have any really seriously large cash-ins, but we've been consistent, which is important. It actually, at one point, felt like it was going to be a really one-sided match, and we were going to kind of clean out the other team. But they had some good pushes, some good cash-ins. You know, obviously playing alone, I can't really define whether or not we have somebody actually playing defense and trying to lock down their banks and going for those steals. Going for those steals is obviously a big part, I think, of a match of Bounty Hunt when you have a really coordinated team, and that's how you get a serious victory. But I like Bounty Hunt a lot, you know, despite the factors that come, again, with the human element. When Bounty Hunt is on point, when you've got two teams really going all in for it, you get some really close, down-to-the-wire, absurd matches that are a really damn good time. And dare I say, Bounty Hunt is one of the best modes in Titanfall 2, even if it is one of the least played. Tried to eject there and forgot how I eject before I'm in Doom State because it's been that long. Thank you guys so much for watching. Really consider what I said today if you're one of those people who finds yourself speaking out of just rage, unfiltered. You know, take the time to listen to what developers have to say. If you want to follow me on Twitter, honestly, one of my favorite things about Twitter is that I simply make it a platform to, number one, share dog pictures. Not too many of those. But to share the thoughts and the viewpoints and the perspectives of developers. I follow, at this point, hundreds upon hundreds of game developers, a lot of them who are open to sharing the difficulties of their work or just sharing their work in its rawest form right on social media. You know, that to me is what I've always used Twitter as. It could be a very powerful platform for consumers, social media in general. You know, very powerful platform for the consumer, for the gamer, for the person on the other side of the screen to interact and to communicate, hopefully in a positive way, with the person behind the product that they're playing, you know. So there's stuff out there. While we're not in a world where every developer can just have this excessive transparency, because feedback is the lash out, I should say, from the vocal minority is often pretty harsh. There is people out there, developers, who talk about these things, and you can follow them and you can learn a lot, and you can get a much better perspective on just how the industry works. And I just think it's something that we should all do. I think in general in life, regardless of what we're talking about entertainment wise, going to a restaurant, ordering food, a fast food restaurant, a real restaurant, going to a clothing store, better understanding the person on the other side of the counter, on the other side of the screen, on the other side of the glass, makes everybody's lives more positive and allows us to make change more quickly, more rapidly. And in general, it breeds a healthier society. PMA, guys, keep that positive mental attitude. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, remember to play smart, remember to play to challenge yourself, but most importantly, remember to play for fun.